Welcome back. So besides the teaching workload, doing research is one of the important tasks of a lecturer. Writing an article and finding good journal for some might not be a big deal, but for many others, it is really a challenge. To write or not survive? That is the question. So our next speaker is a renowned expert that has an outstanding citation on Google Scholar with a number of articles and book chapters. I was amazed when receiving a 40-page CV with lists of publications and positions he has experienced. 11,000 citations, H-Index 54, chief editor of 2 journals are just some of the information about this phenomenon scholar. He is here today to share with us his journey and give practical advice on publishing on competitive journals, which can change our mindset. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to present to you Professor Timothy Teal. Please welcome.
Thank you very much for the applause. I'll just take a couple of seconds to share my content. Okay, I'm assuming everybody can see that.
Yes, we do.
Hear me? Thank you so much.
Yeah.
This morning's talk will cover these areas. I'll briefly describe what are competitive journals and why do we publish in competitive journals, what do reviewers and editors look for, some of the implications for academics and graduate students, and then closing suggestions for all of us. Okay, just very briefly about myself. I've done quite a fair bit of publishing, and I've written works in many interdisciplinary areas, but mainly in the areas of educational psychology, educational technology, and quantitative methods. I've published over 140 of these in the various indexed journals, such as those in SSCI, SCI, and AHCI. To do this regularly, at any one time, I have between 15 to 20 manuscripts under review. I'm also chief editor for 2 international journals, one of which is an SSCI journal. I also serve in many different journal editorial boards, over 10 of them. In addition to that, I'm also asked to review manuscripts by editors of high impact journals in my respective area. However, despite all that I've done, the most important thing is I still find writing a very challenging task that you have to constantly work at it. So it doesn't mean that I've got all this and I've written, published so much. Writing has become so easy. No, that's far from the truth. So it is my privilege and honor today to share with you some of my thoughts relating to writing and publishing for competitive journals. So first of all, I want to say a little bit about what I regard as competitive journal. Basically, they share several attributes. First, competitive journal generally belong to a list. And what list is that? There are many lists available. Some of the most important lists are the SSCI, which stands for Social Sciences Citation Index, AHCI, Arts and Humanities Citation Index, then SCI, which is Sciences Citation Index. So depending on what field, what your disciplines are, you will probably publish in journals that belong to one or more of these indexed journals. Secondly, competitive journals usually have an impact factor. An impact factor is a number, and you want that number to be as big as possible. That number is computed based on the number of journal articles a journal has published versus the number of citations it has received 3 years prior to an impact factor being given to a particular journal. So for example, a journal with an impact factor of 4 will be regarded as more significant, more respectable than a journal with an impact factor of 0.5. But this is also disciplinary in nature. Some disciplines can have very high impact factors, particularly those in the medicine, engineering, and the pure sciences. But disciplines within social sciences tend to have lower ones. So we have to see this particular issue in context. Perceived to be better than non-listed journals. All right. So most researchers, scholars will tend to refer to journals which are indexed because of this general perception that it is more difficult, more challenging, more prestigious to publish in indexed journals than those which are not. Have better quality assurance in the review process. More often than not, journals in these indices tend to be more rigorous in their review. They tend to have more reviewers reviewing a single manuscript relative to the others, and they tend to have access to top scholars in their pool of reviewers compared to the others. Are more frequently cited by authors. This observation can be seen from journal articles in where you see the authors referring to works from other indexed journals, articles from other indexed journals. So all you need to look is just look at the reference list, and you will find this particular observation to be becoming more and more regular. Lower acceptance rates because of the popularity and the demand by authors to publish in competitive journals. They tend to receive an overwhelming number of submissions in each year. Hence, because the number of articles each journal can publish is fixed, they have to reject and turn down many manuscripts. Enjoy a higher submission rate. This is related to number 6. Have a longer review process, more and more so. So if the editor has received many more articles, many more submissions for review, then the amount of time, especially given that the number of reviewers will not change very much, very quickly, hence the amount of time taken to review each manuscript may be lengthened. Have a longer publication queue. So in very good journals, even after a manuscript has been accepted, they will have to wait for a while before that particular article gets published. All right, in many universities, publishing an article will mean that the article is finally in print, given a year of publication, a volume number, an issue number, and page number. So I've just described to you what are some of the attributes of competitive journals. Next, I want to talk about why I think we need to publish in competitive journals. Not just to publish, but publish in competitive journals. First, many universities, especially those which are interested in university ranking, they see the ability to publish in competitive journal as a mark of your scholarship. And publishing in competitive journal is also regarded as evidence of research impact. When your articles get published in a journal, which is regarded as good and prestigious by scholars in your field, many scholars will refer to it and cite your articles when they write, when they publish, either within the same or in the other journals. Representative of scholarship. This, I would say, is perhaps one aspect, all right? Not the sole representative, but one aspect. That many universities, again, those which are interested in climbing the university ranking, they would like their faculty members to be recognized authors of journal articles in their respective disciplines, whose works can be seen in very good journals in each discipline. Again, competitive journals are mostly international journals with readership coming from all across the globe. So when you publish something in a journal that is seen by many people around the world, you will receive international acknowledgement or recognition. Last but not least, publishing in competitive journal is now an organizational requirement. So universities, human resources or university senior management, when considering a faculty member for promotion or in their recruitment processes or in the offering of doctoral or master's scholarship, will look at an applicant's profile. Amongst other things, they want to see whether this applicant has published in competitive good journals or not. So I've talked about what these journals are, and I've talked about why we need to consider working towards publishing in these journals. Next, I'll talk a little bit about after you've submitted your manuscript, what do editors and the reviewers look for in your journals? Firstly, they look at the overall manuscript. All manuscripts usually in good journals go through two stages, two broad stages. The first stage is where editorial managers or chief editor will do a screening of your manuscript. And these are the things they usually will look for. Whether the currency, the thought is current. Is it new? Is it old? Or is it something very old? Is it a topic that have been discussed for a long time already? Then they look at how you've used the language. Obviously, if you want to publish in an English journal, then the assumption is you should be competent in the use of the English language. Robust research design. They want to see whether you have selected an appropriate, a suitable research design in an attempt to answer your research question. The methodology that comes with the design, conciseness in words. All, most if not all the journals impose a word limit, all right? So in education, social sciences, majority of the journal will have a word limit, say between 6,000 to 8,000. If you exceed those vastly, your manuscript would be rejected straight away. Compliance with journal requirement. Some of the journal requirements usually include, again, number of word, the word limit, the formatting, which you are required to use, whether is it MLA, Chicago, Harvard, APA, or one that has been customized by the journal itself. So these are the broad aspects of the manuscript the editors will look at. Once the editor feels that your manuscript is okay, has got a good chance of surviving the 2, 3, or even more blind external reviews, which will be a lot more rigorous than just looking at these, then the chief editor will proceed to send out your manuscript for external review. Then following on, what do these external reviews look for? First, they look for a very compelling introduction. Now, you have to understand that in your field, any field you're in, many manuscripts would have been published. All right. Editors, reviewers will have read many manuscripts. So in order to catch their attention right from the beginning, you need to have something that is compelling, something that is refreshing, something that draws their attention so that they will want to keep on reading and reviewing your manuscript. A thorough literature review. What is the literature review? Basically, a literature review serves 3 basic functions. First, you have to talk about what has been done already. So if you are discussing a theory, for example, you have to talk about how did this theory come about, when did it start, how did this theory become important. So how did it come about? Then you have to talk about the lifespan of the theory until recent times. What has been done? So what do we know about the theory? All right, and what do we not know about this particular theory? Then moving on, you then, based on your review of the literature and your critical understanding of what other scholars have done, based on the same theory, you then propose or argue for a case of what should be done, and hence using this literature review to support your present study, which you have reported in the manuscript. Next, we have methodological sophistication. Gone are the days where you just write a few words to describe the methods of data collection, some words about the participants, so on and so forth. Yeah. But in today's context, reviewers are more demanding in the information which are required in the methods. So when you talk about participants, people want to know what are your sampling methods if you are doing a quantitative study, right? You report that you have surveyed, say, for example, 200 students. Reviewers want to know why did you choose 200? Is it enough? Is it not enough? What are issues involved? What are the limitations of selecting a sample? And whether these samples, how were they selected? How were they invited? So on and so forth. Competent treatment of data. You've collected your data based on your proposition of the research questions, and the reason why you collect your data is because you want to answer your research question using proper established empirical methods. So after you've collected your data, you need to demonstrate that you possess sufficient skills and knowledge to analyze the data in order that they will be appropriate to support the claims you are going to make from the discussion. And this discussion should be data-driven, which is related to the data that you've collected and analyzed earlier. So broadly speaking, these are some of the manuscripts reviewers and editors expect to see in the different section within the manuscript. Now let me go through very quickly what are some of the things that you need to think about in each individual section. First, your introduction need to have a very clear focus. You need to talk or focus on the topic, not the context, right? So if you are, say, perception of students in the use of technology for teaching during the pandemic, a study in Vietnam, then your topic should be technology use during COVID, and your context should be Vietnam or Vietnamese students. You should then endeavor to provide compelling arguments to support your claims, and our ideas should be persuasive, so the reviewers will then continue to read on. Having provided a focus and presented your arguments and ideas, you will then propose or state the problem. So the problem should be well defined, and many people ask, how do we know whether a sentence or a statement is a problem? So we know that a sentence or a paragraph shows a problem when, after reading it, you feel that you need to provide, or there should be an appropriate solution. So in the context of the introduction, reviewers and editors would be looking out for these different aspects, all right, within the introduction section. Following on, you then go and work on the literature review. Regardless of the field and the discipline that you work on, regardless of the type of research that you work on, whether it could be qualitative or quantitative, all research needs a strong theoretical basis. All right. So in the minds of editors and reviewers, especially for top journals, they'll be asking themselves, so what is the theory underpinning this particular study? You're expected to discuss many constructs or concepts, and in order to do that in a consistent way throughout the manuscript, I strongly encourage you to provide clear operational definitions. Why? Because some concepts and constructs mean different things to different readers. But if you have provided the operational definition, this will anchor your discussion to come in the minds of your reader. Whether they agree with you or not, that's a separate thing. But they understand what you would mean by using certain words or certain concepts. The presence of seminar and recent works is important in a literature review because you want to be able to show how this work came about. Seminar, very important work, important scholars in the particular topic, and how this particular topic has been studied till recently. And this will allow you to be able to state the amount of contribution your current study will make. So your readers will be able to see some kind of a progression about this topic since it began to capture the attention of scholars until recently when you've conducted this particular research. In the literature review, it is important to state the research gaps so that people can understand why you're doing this research. And the reason why you're doing this research, among many other noble aims, is to fill in the research gap of that particular topic or themes or discipline you're working on. The research questions, they should be answerable. Finally, literature review, because of the nature of what it is, tends to be the section that contains most words to be written in a journal manuscript. As such, it is important to ensure that they are coherent, meaning to say all the different ideas are connected to each other. Each paragraph is related to what comes before it and what comes after it. Each sentence is linked to what comes before it and what comes after it. Moving on, methods, you have to explain why you think certain research design are suitable and appropriate for your research, or to answer the research questions you have written in either the introduction or literature review sections. You talked about participants, you clearly define them, you describe your procedures well, and you provide information on the measures of instruments you will be using to collect and analyze your data. Describe the data analysis plan. If you're doing a qualitative research, you have to talk about the strategy. You're going to analyze the data. If you're doing coding, you have to describe how you will go about the process, what you'll be looking for. If you are doing a quantitative research, you have to describe your the statistics that you're going to use for analysis, for answering your research questions. Results. You always refer to your research questions, because the reason why you've collected and analyzed your data is so that you can answer your research question. Use appropriate analysis technique, which if you had described in the earlier section, you would have thought about this quite thoroughly. Tables and figures. Some authors think that if they have many tables and figures, that may impress the reviewers or editors. But this is never the truth. All right, editors and reviewers look for tables and figures which are meaningful, which will support your argument, because you do not just present the tables and figures, you then proceed to write words below or above the tables and figures. All right, present your results clearly. Again, put them in a coherent manner. If you are presenting your results according to the research questions, you may put them in that order. Question number 1, you present the results, followed by question number 2, the results for question number 2, so on and so forth. Finally, we talked about the discussion, which to many reviewers and editors is a very important section, because the discussion is where you've completed the research or your study, you've collected the data, you've analyzed the data, and having gone through this process, you now will start to make claims, present your arguments, answer the questions, and then make scholarly contributions, highlight contributions to the study. In many educational research, because it is education, and education is a highly practical discipline, many journalists and reviewers look for contributions to theory and contribution to practice. So when your reader read your manuscript, if it is in an area within education, they want to know how your findings could be applied to teaching and learning instead of just your contribution to the selected theory, which is also important because that helps to further the particular body of knowledge within the discipline. But there's no perfect research. So we also will look for limitations and how future research could expand the scope of your finding, or how future research could overcome the limitations you have presented in your studies. So I've talked about what I think are competitive journals. Why do I think as scholars we need to publish in these competitive journals? What are certain elements and components within these journals the editors and reviewers look for when they are reading your works? Now I'll talk about what are some of these implications for academics and graduate students. Because graduate students, for many of them, they aspire to be academics. Firstly, we need to know why we publish. All right? Most of us publish because it is related to the job. We want to apply for a job. We need to renew our contract. We want to apply for promotion. And yet, there are some people who just publish because they find it fun and leisurely. Then we know when to publish. As I said earlier at the beginning of my talk, there are many, many people who wish to publish in good journals. Hence, the submission rate has gone up very much. And the time taken to publish will then subsequently be very much lengthened. So, in general, for education journals, usually they take about close to 2 years from submission to publication. And if you're already an established scholar, you have some publication already, you have to think about where you are at the moment, how many publications you have, where you want to go, how many publications you aspire to have within a period of time. Then we need to know how many to publish. Again, it is a balance between your job requirement. Many university mandates their faculty members, their professors, with a requirement to say maybe 5 competitive journal over a period of 3 years, let's say. All right. And some people publish based on their personal aspirations. All right. Some people like to have 2 publications in competitive journal per year. Some would like to have 5. Some are quite happy with 1. Know where to publish. Not all journals are the same. Some are ranked higher than the others. And usually those are highly ranked tend to require more time to write, more time to revise, and tend to be a lot more difficult to be successful at publishing in them compared to those which are not ranked very high. So now I'll just give you an overview of the review process, a very, very rough overview. All right, so first you have to write the manuscript, assuming you spend about 3 to 4 months, not continuously, over a period of say maybe 1 year, you write intermittently, but the overall could be 3 to 4 months' time. All right. Then you send it out for an internal initial review. Now, if the editor think that your manuscript has potential, it will be sent out for external review. And in competitive journals, external review could last anything from 3 to 9 months. And I have had some experiences where the review of my manuscript took about 1.5 to 2 years, simply because it was so competitive. If you are successful, you may be invited to revise your manuscript. But increasingly so, I've noticed that good competitive journals tend to be reviewed by many reviewers. My experience is it may go up to 6 reviewers. So if you have to address the comments of 6 reviewers, it may take you a long time because you might have to do more research, more study, more literature review, so on and so forth. Then if it is successful, you may be invited for a second revision, which usually will be quite quick. Sometimes there may be 3rd or 4th revision. But supposing you've done well, and after your second revision, you receive a good news that your manuscript has been accepted. Then this will then go into proofreading, where the production editor will get in touch with you to get your approval on the final manuscript. Then your manuscript will appear online. Take note that it is not considered published yet. It's just an online article. And finally, your article may get published. Anything from half a year to 1.5 years. So again, let me repeat what I meant by published. It means that your article has been assigned a year of publication, a volume number, an issue number, and page number. So a rough estimate of the entire publication or review process may be anything from 1.5 to 3.5 years. And 3.5 years is something I have personally experienced. 1.5 years would be more common in today's context. Very rarely, few journals would publish your accepted manuscript within or below 1 year. So this is roughly the amount of time that you need to consider. Sometimes longer because you may be asked to do 3rd or 4th revision. Or sometimes longer because after 1st and 2nd revision, your manuscript could be rejected. Then you go back to step 1 with other journals. And you keep trying and trying, and the time taken for a particular manuscript will take longer and longer. So writing publication is something that comes with no guarantee. All right, no matter how much you have written, whether you're starting on your first one or you're writing your 151st one, no one can guarantee what the outcome will be. And in closing, I will share with you some of the strategy I've used for myself and I have taught my students to consider. First, regulate your writing. You try to get involved in writing tasks in more than one manuscript at any one time, so that you do not suffer from fatigue or burnout from working on only one manuscript. So most of the time, I'm involved in writing anything from 5 to 10 manuscripts, different manuscripts with different people. And as a result, I get to revisit previous manuscripts with a fresh pair of eyes. Learn about the writing process. Now, writing is not just putting in words what you think. Partly is that, but writing requires you or forces you to think very clearly. Because while you can say things and it will soon pass, people will forget. But when you write something, it becomes permanent. People can read it over and over again. Every word you put in your manuscript has to be there for a reason. You must be able to explain every word you put in your manuscript, why they should be there, why you use certain words, why you say things in a certain way, why you only use this number of words for this particular section. Update your knowledge and your skill. So say if you are a scholar in the field of reading and writing, research, then you need to keep reading, keep writing, keep yourself updated with the latest thinking in this particular field. Master the language for writing. If you're going to publish in English journals, and I assume that many of you are, then you need to continue to learn about, continue to hone your skills in using the English language for writing. And of course, listening, speaking, and reading as well. Collaborate in writing. This used to be not so important in the past, but in recent years, it has taken on a new importance, new level of importance to collaborate. Why is this so? The demands and expectations of editors and reviewers from top journals are so high, so much, that it will be impossible or it will be very difficult to find somebody who is an expert in the content, an expert in the methodology, an expert in the data analysis aspects of the research. So it is not uncommon to find a group of people writing a particular manuscript. Amongst them, one will be very good in analyzing data. One will be very good in the content relating to the topic. And one will be very good in pulling everything together, ensuring the flow of the manuscript, making sure they are coherent, checking for language, editing for content, so on and so forth. Review manuscripts. When you're invited to review manuscripts, although in many cases, in fact, most cases, this particular task is actually a contribution without reward, meaning to say you will not be paid any money or in kind for doing this job. But what you get out of it is something that money cannot buy. Because when you review for journals, especially top journals, you get to read what other people are doing research in, what is the latest research, what are some of the significant thought behind your research area. And also very importantly, you see how other people write, present their argument, how other people make their introduction compelling, how other people organize their literature review, how other people approach the treatment of the data they've collected. Last but not least, you get to see how other people discuss the finding and argue, all right, their propositions, their ideas. Last but not least, you need to start to write. If you don't write, you will never get published. If you write, you may get published. All right. But one thing for sure, if you do not write, no matter how big an expert you are, how much ideas you have, how good you are in your data analysis, if you do not write, you will never get published. All right. So here's a personal observation. The publication process is not going to get easier. However, you will become more rigorous in the time to come. And with this, I'll end my talk today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Teo. Thank you for sharing your journey with us so we can avoid some of the pitfalls that we possibly encounter. And we received a lot of questions regarding the publication. And in your slide, you have mentioned about the superiority in language. And we received a few questions. For example, from Ms. Mighty Quỳnh Lan. She said that for her, English as a second language is the barrier for most and almost impossible to overcome. We received quite a few questions regarding the superiority in language. And regarding English, we received the question from Ms. Mighty Quỳnh Lan. And she said for her, English as a second language is the barrier and almost impossible to overcome. And reviewers always ask her to have the paper proofread by a native speaker. So please share with us the advice for the faculties who is not good at English but wants to publish in a good journal. What should we do? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I have unshared my content and I'm just checking whether my audio is still okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you for the question. I think that is a very, very important question because especially in the Asian countries, such as Thailand, China, Vietnam, maybe in Malaysia as well, also in Singapore, because we are not native speakers, we have to work extra hard. However, the education system in these countries differ one from the other. In some countries, English is taught as a first language. So as scholars, you get more exposure to the English language. But in countries like, say, maybe Thailand and Vietnam, and even in China, they study English as a second, third, or even fourth language. Hence, they have limited exposure to the language itself. Now, when you submit your manuscripts to a journal, the reviewers and editors do not care where you come from. And they do not care the problems and the difficulties that you have, right? And they will not, because this is to be fair to everybody in the world who submit the manuscript. So some of the strategies I have learned what scholars from these countries whose English level is similar to Vietnam would be, first, you try to find collaborators within the country or outside the country that are good in English, right? Collaborators within the same universities or within the same country who may have studied and gained their qualifications from an English-speaking countries, or who may have majored in English in their bachelor degree, master's, or even PhD. So these are some colleagues who might be able to help. And by engaging them, you perhaps may want to, because if they are also faculty members, they need to publish. So you're meeting their needs as well, right? So you make them co-authors of your manuscript, okay? Then some other strategies will involve getting the first draft out and having it translated either by a colleague or by a professional editor. And then work on the translated copy in English. In many cases, translation services are such that, or rather they are limited to only translating your language, but they can't translate your content. Therefore, if you do not change, is everything all right?
Yes, 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 sorry.
Okay. Therefore, if you do not continue to work on the translated manuscript, it will become incoherent and nonsensical in nature. Yeah. So basically, two broad ideas or suggestion. One, collaborate with a colleague or a few colleagues whose English is better than you and consider making them co-authors. Number two, engage the services of professional editors, and then continue working from there. Right. I have a personal experience with a colleague from a non-English speaking country who started writing the manuscript in a language other than English. And between that colleague and myself, we went through 19 revisions before we submitted the manuscript over a period of 1.5 years of revision. So this is the kind of effort you have to be prepared to put in if you want to publish in top journal. I hope my reply has been useful to this question. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much. Regarding the collaboration with other researchers and authors, we received a question by Ms. Trần Thị Thu Hương. She asked, what should we be careful with if we want to send our manuscript to a volunteer editor from a research community or a forum like AuthorEd? So with the AuthorEd, and we share our paper with them and ask them to help us with the proofreading. What should we be careful with?
Mm-hmm. When you say volunteer, I'm assuming that you do not have to pay them to do the job. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Now, whether you send your manuscript to AuthorEd or you send your manuscript to anybody, you have to be very clear in your mind the extent to which you know this person or this organization. Yeah. And you have to really do your homework to find out about the authenticity of these people. I've not used AuthorEd before, but I've collaborated with many people. So for example, if I'm collaborating with you now and I've completed a manuscript, then I have to trust and believe that you will not share my manuscript with other people without my knowledge. Right? You will respect this trust we have between us in relation to writing this manuscript. Right? Even if you want to ask the opinion of a third person, then you have to ask me first, because this is my manuscript. Yeah. So there's this issue of ownership. Right? So do not be taken away by people who say, I will help you, please send it to me. Yeah. Because these things are so competitive nowadays, and it is something that money cannot buy. Now, if it is something that money can buy, then things will become very easy. All right. Imagine the top journal in your field. Many universities promote faculty members based on how many top publications you have. And many people do not get promoted because it's just too difficult, too challenging. And it's also something that money cannot buy, right? So there must be a high degree of trust, high degree of professional respect, all right? Some experiences are good. Sometimes you have bad experiences when collaborating with other people. Then you just have to decide how to move on from there. I have good, bad, and ugly experiences. So it comes with part of the job. All right.
Yes.
Thank
I
you.
agree. Yeah. Thank you very much. Choosing a good researchers and co-workers is very important. And also, one of the ways that we need to learn is how to respond to the feedback from the editor or the reviewer. And it is also the questions from Mr. Vũ Trọng Lưỡng. He asked, could you share some suggestions on how to answer, how to respond to the reviewers when you received the manuscript?
Very important question. Why? Because very few of us submit a manuscript and it gets accepted straight away. Very, very rarely. I published over 180 journal articles, and this happened to me only 2 times, right? And these 2 times were in journals that are not top on the list, but they are very good journals. Yeah. So it happens very rarely. So when we publish, we have to adopt the attitude of revising as something that is normal. Yeah. So there are a few things. When you submit to a very good journal, the revision or the comments from reviewers could be very challenging. Sometimes it's just outside your skill set. Take, for example, you mention a theory which you are not an expert in, and the reviewer found that interesting. They ask you many questions about that theory. So what do? If you are collaborating with 2 other people, and of course you have to discuss as a group, how do you approach that? But if they can't, then you either give up the manuscript, which would be a pity because you would have spent so much time and effort on it, yeah, and you try not to do that, or you try to include somebody who's an expert as an additional author. Usually you do this by asking the chief editor for permission first before you do that. And usually chief editors, they are reasonable people. They will listen to they will see what reasons you have. And if your reason is a good one, like the example I gave you, they may agree for you to include additional authors in the revision of the manuscript for subsequent resubmission. All right, so you either do a bit more research, do more homework, or get permission from chief editor to include more authors into your manuscript. All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's very clear on how we should deal with the manuscript and the publication and the reviewing of the manuscript. And the last question for you is, what do you think about the saying published or perished?
What do I think about this?
Yes.
I think, although it's something that is not very positive, to a large extent, it's becoming very, very real. Yeah. All these are driven by university performance data, right? And every university, every country would like to see their universities in the top, maybe top 50, top 100, or top 200, top 500, or even top 1,000, so long as the university names get into the list, right? So how do you do this? You do this by understanding the criteria of university ranking, all right? And university ranking comprises a few components. One of the most heavily weighted component is research. And within this particular component, some elements are considered: number of papers, number of citations, yeah? And citations is something which one should or cannot control. One should not and cannot control, yeah? So citation, in principle, reflects the number of citation of your work should reflect the respect and the impact that your work is making in a particular field, right? And the reason why this is included in university ranking is to make an assessment of the degree of importance that the scholars in a particular university are making impact in a particular field, all right? So the only way to have citation is to have publication. Because if there's no publication, then there's nothing to be cited, right? So I see there will be pressure directly or indirectly in the days to come, in the years to come. And I want to encourage faculty members, scholars, especially the younger ones, to look at this from the positive aspects rather than something you have to do. Learn about it, do it, and when you do it well, you get the level of satisfaction that, again, I say money cannot buy, right? I can remember the first time I published in the top journal, it was so good. But it took me many, many years. I didn't publish in the top journal from the first year I became a faculty member. I have to work very hard for many years. And in the process, get many papers rejected. Yeah. So if you look at my CV, I would have maybe 141 publication in SSCI journal. But what my CV doesn't say is how many times my manuscript have been rejected. The number will be much higher than 141. Yeah. So if you do not give up, whether you think your English is not good, I'm not a native speaker. I have to work hard so I can understand what you are feeling. For those who think my English is not good, spend the time, put in the effort, think of creative new strategy, collaborate with people who are like-minded, so everybody benefits. All right, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor Teo. It's very concise, but also like very, I have to say, breakthroughs with that one, so that we learn how we should keep track with our writing and how we should keep moving on with the so-called research life.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Wow, time flies. It looks like we've come to the end of the morning session. Could you please join me in thanking our keynote speakers, Professor Martin Hayden and Professor Timothy Teo, for their valuable lectures and sharing. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Thank you.